Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Stephen and Peter Sachs Museum at the Missouri Botanical Garden. I'm Neshka Pfeiffer, Sachs Museum Curator, and your host and moderator for the Grafting the Grape online program series, which is sponsored in partnership with the Missouri Humanities Council and with support from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Today's presentation, Missouri Viticulture in a Family Vineyard by Steffie Littlefield and Cyndy Keesee, will begin shortly. This is the third presentation in the Grafting the Grape series, and we're very excited to have you here with us. There are 6 presentations in this series, and they highlight content from the upcoming exhibition at the Sachs Museum, Grafting the Grape, American Grapevine Rootstock in Missouri and the World, which we hope to open to the public later this summer. The previous event's recording is now available, and I'll drop a link in the chat later on for anyone who's interested in that talk. We're able to offer accessibility features, including ASL interpretation for the deaf and hard of hearing and live captioning, which you can access via the closed caption button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. To turn that off or for more options, click on that closed caption feature. A note about today's webinar, it will run approximately 1 hour. The presentation will be approximately 35 minutes with time at the end for a Q&A session. Throughout the webinar, we encourage you to use the Q&A function in the box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll sort through your questions and get to as many of them as possible at the end of the presentation. Today's program will be recorded and posted on the Missouri Botanical Garden's YouTube channel in the coming weeks. I'm joining you from the Sachs Museum at the Garden, which I'd like to acknowledge is on the ancestral and occupied land of the Chickasaw Nation, Illini Tribe, Iowa Tribe, Kickapoo Tribe, Osage Nation, Oto Missouri Tribe, and the Quapaw Nation. We acknowledge the ongoing relationships these nations have with this land and urge non-native people to educate themselves about this history and about the contemporary work of tribal sovereignty within these nations. Through this acknowledgement, we honor the elders and their descendants of these indigenous nations in order to bring visibility to these long silenced histories while working toward a more just and equitable future. Our speakers today, Steffie Littlefield and Cyndy Keesee, will be presenting live from their family vineyard on viticulture and winemaking using French-American hybrid grapes and the historical legacy of using their family farm as the foundation for a 21st century vineyard, winery, and brewery. Steffie Littlefield, co-owner and viticulturist of Edg-Clif Vineyard, Winery and Brewery, has an AS in horticulture and a BS in agriculture horticulture. She has served as president of Gateway Greening, vice president and treasurer of Gateway Professional Horticulturist Association, and president of the Horticulture Co-op of Metro St. Louis. She has been a landscape designer for over 25 years and is president of the members board of the Missouri Botanical Garden. She's now serving as vice president of the Missouri Grape Growers Association. Cyndy Keesee, co-owner and winemaker of Edg-Clif Vineyard, Winery and Brewery, has been in the winemaking industry since 2008, when Edg-Clif planted their first 4 acres of grapes and now turns up to 2,500 gallons of juice into award-winning wines. She's involved with the Grape and Wine Institute at the University of Missouri and the Missouri Wine Technical Group. One of her creations, Twilight, a sweet white Chambourcin, was recognized as best in class in the rosé category and has been featured in several wine publications. Steffie and Cyndy, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your vineyard today. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Hi, everyone. We'll welcome you to Edg-Clif here. I think this the Zoom format gives us a rare opportunity to not only share what we love to do here and tell you about our history, but also share our location with you. This behind me is our granary barn, and I'm just going to give you a little pan of where we are here at the vineyard, and then we'll move to Cyndy. So I'm just trying to, here it is. So there. So you can see up above me is our vineyards. And we have 3 vineyards up there, and we're going to be in those shortly, and some of the more historic buildings on the property. And as we switch up to Cyndy, I just want to show you that she's up at the top of the hill, in the building at the top of the hill. where we have the winery up there. All right, to you, Cyn.
Thanks, Steph. Hi, everybody. And yes, I am up the hill, we affectionately call this location. It is in our old show barn. This is where we had cattle here for 65 years. To give you a little bit of history about us, the farm has been in our family for 95 years. So we're getting really close to that 100-year farm marker. We're very excited about that coming up. Our grandfather started the property in 1926 when he bought a small parcel to be sort of a gentleman's getaway. He was interested in hunting, horseback riding, things that gentlemen like to do back in the 20s, among other things. And so he bought a small parcel of property back then. In 1930, when the Depression hit, when the stock market burst or broke, he bought 5 different farms, a total of 5 farms over the years, and started the cattle ranch. His family, they were cattle farmers back in England. And so he was a little bit romantic about that, I guess, and decided that he wanted to grow Herefords here. I've got behind me a picture of the perfect Hereford back in the 60s. He was actually featured, I believe, in an encyclopedia one edition one year. So that's kind of cool. So yes, we were very active. At the height of this farm, we had, 2,300 acres when Steffi and I were young growing up. And would calve about 1,000 calves here a year. So that is what we came out here to do when we were little, when our father inherited the farm in 1961. Steffi and I started coming out every weekend and spent every summer out here with our parents. And we were quite small. And we loved it. We loved being outside. We loved the animals. We loved being a part of something big. This show barn is where those cattle, our show cattle, were actually housed. I know a lot of people have heard of, obviously, dog shows, horse shows, but yes, there are cattle shows as well. And we would take anywhere from 20 to 24 head of cattle on the show road every summer, which was a big endeavor back then. That they lived up in this barn during the day in the summertime, and at night they got turned out into their pens. In the wintertime, it was the opposite. So they could stay warm in the wintertime at night and then be outside in the sunshine during the day. So when we started putting in the winery in 2010, we realized we were going to have a crop of grapes, and we quickly determined that we wanted to make wine. I was really interested in making the wine. Steffi blames me for this project all the time. But we wanted to do it ourselves. We felt like we had a big history here, a big heritage in the cattle business, and I just couldn't let somebody else make wine for us. So we quickly turned our old dairy room, salon, if you would, into a winery in about 4 months. Compliments to Steffi's husband, Stephen, who did all the lion's share of the work on that. So that's when I got to start becoming the winemaker here. We've really had a great time doing that. We love it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Okay, so that is an aerial shot of the farm. I can't really point to it, but over on the left-hand side, you can see where our river runs through the property, and that is the Forche Renault River. And our house is nestled right up just due to the right of that. You can kind of see where there's a structure right there. Yes. So that is where our house is. It is an old French trapper's lodge that was built into the side of a fallen cave. So it has a natural grotto underneath the house. And that is what the farm is named for, Edg-Clif Farms. People always ask us that question, and that is where it is. So that's an 80-foot cliff right there. It's hard to tell from that picture, but that's what it is. And then, of course, here's a shot of the granary right there in the bottom right corner there, where Steffi was standing. And you can see back, if you go farther back to the right there, there's an old house there. That's where we actually have a pavilion today. And that's where our wine and beer tasting room is, or pavilion, if you would, where we entertain guests Friday through Sundays and holiday Mondays. So we spend a lot of time outside. We love it. Of course, this is just a portion of the farm. We have 725 acres still here. And so, yeah, it's a lot to deal with. So, yeah, the idea of doing this and putting in the winery and the vineyards was to support this farm, and so that we could keep it in the family for our kids. We do have a 5th generation on the ground right now. They're kind of small, but they do help out on bottling days. They like to come up and bottle with us, so they can feel like they're a part of this whole operation as well. Yeah, these are some of our cattle. Behind that, you can see that's the show barn. See that long barn? That's where I'm standing, is up in there right now. I'm actually standing in our barrel room, where we store wines, but we also do some small events and things in this room as well. You can also see the old loafing sheds that are back behind those cattle. That's where the bulls would hang out. They were our stud animals, and that's where they would hang out. And then the cows down in the front with their horns. They're so cute. I know not everybody thinks that, but we do. Steffi and I do. So yeah, that's a neat picture, because it does show, that picture is probably about 1961, I would imagine. Oh, here we are. Priceless, right? This is the picture that everybody hopes gets lost somewhere. But this is a picture of Steffi and I with our mother, and we're standing there with our pet bull. He is a grand champion, Hereford. His name is Tuffy, but his real name was Zato Heritage. He was really kind of the first of the modern bulls. This is probably 1963 here, I would imagine. I look like I'm about 7 years old, I think. And he has a little bit longer legs than the fellow behind me back here. So yeah, and a little bit smaller brisket. So that became more of the beginning of the modern beef cattle, if you would. So you gotta love the picture of us. How about that hairstack hairdo, right? Haystack hairdo. I think that's it, isn't it?
Yes, for the historic images. Yep. So Steffi, if you can unmute yourself.
First, let me have the video first. And I wanted to just show the vineyards, and then we'll run through how this all happened. So the picture here is showing this same vineyard when it was being just planted. All right, so I gotta turn so I can see. Yeah, so this is showing a picture of the vineyards when we're pruning them, training them, and the structure. So this is a picture of the vineyard in the wintertime. For some time, we had bison on the property. So you can see the bison in the background. We start in January. Actually, we start in March because we're worried about late frost, but we prune back all the vineyards. And this is what we prune off. You can see the snow on the ground during pruning. Then in April, May, we begin to see the buds burst out like this. So this is what the vineyard would look like a couple of months ago. And then they will start to flower. So you can see the flower on the vine. That happens in May. Yeah, so this is in our Vignoles vineyard. So there's this picture, and then there's another one showing the vines covered.
So you cover these. We lost you for a little bit, Steffi. So you use this type of netting to protect the vines from the birds in a non-pesticidal way, right?
Right. So here you can see that the nets are on the vines. The nets will be on the vines for about 30 days, and then we take them off to harvest the grapes. So this is what our Chamberson grapes look like at harvest. Here is a picture of the Chamberson grapes on the vine. So this will happen in September. Then I'm trying to see it. Hang on.
It's one of the white grapes. Cyndy, would you know which ones?
Yes, that's the vignoles grape. So that's what they look like right at harvest time.
Oh, they're there.
See, there's a little blush of yellow on those grapes, and they're very small, tight little clusters. They have very thin skins, those grapes do, and that's why the birds go so crazy for them. We don't feel that we need to net any of the other grapes, thank goodness, because there's too many of them to net anyway. But this one, the bird, it ripens the earliest, and it's the most desirable to the birds. And it's like, everybody says, oh, what kind of birds? I'm like, all birds. It doesn't matter what they are. They all want them.
Yeah, that's the Vidal Blanc. That's what we were looking at in the beginning. Yep. They're much different shape, as you can see, and they ripen later. They make a really crisp, dry white wine or a sweet, fruity wine, depending on how Cyndy handles it.
Yes, is this the Chamberson?
Yes, so that is the Chamberson. So that is we grow the most is in Chamberson. And we make a lot of red wines out of this. Cyndy will talk a little bit more about that. But you can see how gorgeous those turn out.
This looks like it's the harvest. You've harvested.
So this
yes.
In the winery, the Chamberson grapes that we bring in. This is the Chamberson grapes as they are now. So you see they're just coming on, they're green, the foliage is coming down. So they grow quite big during the year. As you remember, when we were pruning in the winter, there was nothing there. And then now all year they do this. And by the time we get to harvest, they'll be on the ground. The vines will be on the ground, and we'll have those big clumps like you saw in the other pictures. And then the culmination of that is taking into harvest and into Cyndy. Turn it over to her.
Hi, welcome into the winery. I have moved us inside here. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
So I moved us inside here into the winery. You can see behind me, we've got tanks. I've got my crusher to stemmer right down here, which isn't normally where it is, but I'm trying to get as much in this picture as I can. And then I also have our press back here. When we harvest the grapes, when they're ready, number one, this is a very small winery. We do things a little bit differently here than some of the other larger wineries because I have smaller tanks. We actually we decide what kind of wine we want to make, the style of wine, and then we work towards that. So instead of bringing in, say, 8 tons of grapes in one day or even more, and then decide what to do with it after we've gotten it in here, we figure out what do we want to work on this week in that day. And that's what we bring in. So we may only bring in 1 ton or 2 tons of grapes at a time. It's easier for us to manage it that way, and we work towards a specific wine. So one of the first things that we do, of course, is we make the vignoles. The vignoles comes in from the vineyard. We try to get it all in one day. It usually takes us 2. They're very small little, hand grenade looking bunches of grapes. They hide up under the leaves, so they're a little bit elusive. And it does take us a little extra time to bring those in. The Chamberson are much easier to see. You can just walk along and with a fork and pick them off, and it's really quite simple. When we bring the vignoles grapes in, we weigh them so I know how much fruit I've got, and then we can start processing the grapes. We use this crusher destemmer to process the grapes. What it does is basically pull the berries off the rachis, so that's the woody stem part that is the structure of the cluster itself. Once we get those processed and it runs through this crusher destemmer, in order to make the vignoles, it goes straight into our press back here. This is a pneumatic press. It's pretty big. It looks kind of small compared to some of the big wineries. For us, though, it's a great time saver. We can put about 1.8 tons of grapes in there. I don't think I've ever gotten it quite that full, but I have gotten a ton and a half in there without a problem. We can process that, so 3,000 pounds of grapes in about an hour and 15 minutes. So that's really a nice time saver for us. We used to use an old basket press. It could take us, you could only put 600 pounds of grapes in there at a time. And even still with that, it took us each rotation or each bunch of grapes that went in there took us about an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half. So this does go a lot quicker for us. Once it's gone through this pneumatic press. Oh, I'll talk about that for a second. Pneumatic press, what it's doing is pressing the grapes against the side of this tank here. And there's little slits in the side, and the juice runs out through these slits. And then it goes down into a tray down below. We then hook up a pump, and we pump that juice into some of these tanks behind me. Now, if I'm doing the whites and the rosés, like the vignoles is a white, it goes into one of these sheer white tanks behind me. And we cold settle out that juice. So we let it sit overnight with a chill plate inside of it. So we're bringing down the temperature of the juice itself so that the next morning we can then rack it off. Sounds fancy, but it's just racking is moving fluid from one vessel to another vessel. So we do rack it off the next day to get rid of some of the solids and some of the bitter character of the fruit itself before we start fermentation. Then we start fermentation on that juice, and it's a cold fermentation that we do. We think that it makes the wines fruitier, naturally fruitier, without being sweet. And that fermentation, because we're running it at a cooler temperature, it takes a lot longer than, say, the reds. So our fermentations run anywhere from about 21 days to 28 days on a cold fermentation. Once that's all done, well, we'll step back for a second. With the reds, it's a little bit different scenario. We always use this crusher destemmer, and it looks tiny, and it's not very big at all. See, I can stand back here. It's not very big. We put one bin of grapes in here at a time, but it'll process a whole bin of grapes, which is about 30 to 32 pounds, and it'll run through it in about 60 seconds. So very quickly. So we can process 60 bins. Really doesn't even take us a full hour, maybe 45 minutes to process 60 bins. That would be 1,800 pounds. So not long at all. When I do the red wines, we run them through the crusher destemmer, same way. And then it goes into these stainless steel tanks. I have quite a few stainless steel tanks. This one over here holds about 200 gallons of must, but I have smaller ones, and I've got a couple of them that are a little bit bigger at 500 gallons of must. With that, we are wanting the skins, the seeds, everything to go into that must. That's where we're going to get our color, we'll get our body, we get our tannins from having all of that in there at the same time. When you're doing a fermentation to make red wines, it's a different as far as we want it to warm up. Okay, so it's a controlled warm up, but we do want it to warm up. So we start fermentation on it right away, that very afternoon once we've harvested those grapes. And then we let it warm up a little bit naturally as the yeast starts consuming the sugars that are in that juice and that must. It is creating energy. It's running around faster and faster. It's multiplying, and that's creating this heat inside the must. The heat is where we're going to get the color from. So that's pulling the color out of those skins, and it's giving it a really rich, wonderful, deep magenta color. People are amazed as to the color of the wines here at Edg-Clif because they're so beautiful. Now, so that fermentation doesn't take very long. The temperature can go from about 60 degrees when I'm starting fermentation up to 80, just shy of 85 degrees overnight. So when I come up in the morning to do my first punch down, it's already up to about 80 degrees. So it's kind of crazy how fast that happens. I use a punch down tool to punch those skins back down underneath the surface of the juice and the fluid so that we're getting the best of the color and the tannins out of those skins. Again, this fermentation only takes 6 or 7 days, so it goes very, very quickly. Once it is done and the skins start dropping to the bottom of the tank, we then run it through this press again to get rid of the skins and the seeds, and then we'll have wine. Okay. Now here at Edg-Clif, we like to be very sustainable as much as humanly possible. And so people ask me all the time, what do you do with all your grape skins? Well, we try to give them to friends of ours who have pig farms or hogs, and they happen to love them. They love the white skins, and when we're doing the rosés, the skins from the red grapes that are not fermented, but they really have a good time once we hand over those fermented skins. Pigs like a party too, evidently. As far as once we have our wines made, oh, and then the rosé. Everybody's always asking me, how do you make rosé? Rosé is a red wine, basically. It's made with red grapes. The biggest difference is somewhere in between. So instead of making in the red wine tanks, like we do with the red grapes to make the red wines, we're going to run those red grapes through this press right after we crush them. That way, we're getting rid of the skins and we're just getting the juice itself. Now, because we're using pressure, we are also getting some color. Now, to do some of the rosés, I've started experimenting with using less pressure and having predominantly free run juice, which is really changing up our rosés a little bit. It's these very subtle nuances can make a big difference in your finished product. So it's kind of fun to play with and to see what we're getting with those. Once all the wines are fermented, we will then start racking them off. If anybody's ever bought juice at the grocery store in a jug, a gallon jug, which everybody does nowadays, and you stick it in your refrigerator when you first bring it home from the store, it's all mixed up in there. And by the next day you come in, you see all these solids falling to the bottom. Well, wine will work the same way. So as we're going through the racking process, the dead yeast and some more solids that are still in that juice will start settling to the bottom of the tanks. We want to rack those off. We're trying to clean up the wine to make our lives easier during filtering. And we rack our wines 4 times here at Edg-Clif, whether they really need it or not. It just makes it go faster. Then we start filtering the wines. Filtering happens 4 times as well. The first 2 filters are what we call fairly coarse filtration. It's mostly to get rid of the bulk of the yeast that are still left over in that wine. At that point, we make some decisions. Some of the wines we will put into barrels for barrel aging. Some of the wines we'll continue to filter down. And then some of the wines we'll also do a cold stabilization process with. And the cold stabilization is a process that we go through in order to make those wines stable for the consumer at home. So if you were to throw your wine in the freezer and forget about it, when you take it out and thaw it out, you won't find little tartrate crystals down in the bottom of the bottle. So in order to do that, we get it filtered twice. We then drive the temperature down using chill plates to about 28 degrees. If the colder you can get it, the better. It doesn't really freeze the wine, but it does drive these crystals out, the tartrates. And potassium bitartrate is nothing more than cream of tartar, just so you guys know, okay? It's always, you're like, what? These are big fancy terms. It's just cream of tartar. and it drives these crystals out of the wine. And they, when we go back to filter it after a couple of weeks, we are filtering it at that cold temperature while it's still in crystallized form, and that takes that cream of tartar out of the wine. So we do that. So we're filtering with that as well. The barrel-aged reds go into barrels for about 12 months, sometimes a little longer. We do make a port-style wine here at Edg-Clif as well. And we're also doing some rosé ports too now. So look forward to that one because they're really fun. The ports, though, the red ones, the port-style wines, the dessert wines, those I like to age them. I happen to really like older ports. So I know I'm not going to sit around and age it for 20 or 30 years in a barrel, but we do leave them in there as long as we can. So we're averaging about 5 years in a barrel before we start bottling them. They've been really well received. They're very small batches. So if anybody's interested in trying them, you're going to have to catch them while we still have them.
Cyndy, can I just interject for a split second? And just in case anybody doesn't know what port is, would you like to explain how it's different from wine?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd love to. Port is it's a fortified wine, is what it is. So when you're making the wine, the difference between doing the regular wines is we ferment them out to a finished residual sugar or all the way dry, depending on the style of wine we're making. Just, that's how you do it, period. And you're not adding anything else to it. So you're getting a finished product that has anywhere from 12.5 to 13% alcohol. And that's our regular wines. To do the port, it's kind of a crazy little process because we start the fermentation just like you would with any of the other wines, but about halfway through, not even quite halfway through, we're going to stop fermentation by introducing grape brandy. And grape brandy that we use is 98% alcohol. So it's really high. Yeah, it's crazy. It doesn't take very much, but you just put enough of that in there that it's going to kill the yeast. It stops the fermentation. We're trying to keep a residual sugar of about 10% in there that's naturally occurring because that's what was already in the grapes when we started fermentation. We went from 22 to 23 Brix down to about 10. And then we're introducing the alcohol to bring the alcohol level, which would have been only about like 7% at that point. And we're bringing in enough alcohol to bring it up to 18% alcohol. So that's when it goes into a barrel after that. Everybody, when we first started doing this, we're like, okay, now what do we do? Because I'm used to fussing over all these wines. I spent a lot of time worrying about them, running tests on them, fussing over them, tasting them, monitoring them. Well, when you've got 18% alcohol in those barrels, you really don't have to do anything anymore. You just stick it in the barrel, put it in a corner somewhere, and let it do its thing. So it's pretty fun.
Great, thank you. Was there? You have some more information to share about your Edg-Clif itself, right?
Yes. So, I'm up here in the vineyard and just wanted to, again, we showed you all these older buildings and things and talk about the reason we did this. We had this family farm that we loved, and it was, we weren't running the cattle anymore. And so we needed to do something to add value back to the property and take care of it. And this became our reason for doing this. We loved, as a horticulturist, I love to grow something like the grapevines. And so as you can see in the background, I have all these beautiful vines back here. It's, this used to be all cattle pens, and we took those out to put in the vineyards. And then right behind me here is another little structure that was just covered with old vines and trees and things like that. And we were able to clear that out. And it's a place we use to have live music sometimes, parties. It's a venue. And then, of course, the building behind me here is the big show barn, which has been turned into the winery, and we actually even host guests and visitors there during the winter when we're not out in our open air pavilion. The other things that we've added to our production here is we have taken one of the little old houses and turned it into the brewery. So we brew our own beer there. So we have craft beer on tap, 6 different beers. And Cyndy's daughter, Rachel, has been our brewmaster, and she's done a fabulous job. And we also have taken some of the small houses that were on the property and turned them into Airbnbs. So our guests can stay in one of the farmhouses as a cottage and enjoy the property for a couple of days if they'd like, and come to the winery. So that's just a kind of a conclusion of where we are now. And we showed you where we started from. And it's been a lot of work, but it's definitely been a labor of love, because this is a special place and we love sharing it with other people. So I'm going to turn it over to Cyndy, and I'm going to join her to answer questions. Thank you all for listening to our presentation.
Thank you both so much. It's so wonderful. It's such a gorgeous day. I'm not going to lie. It would be so lovely to be there in person right now. We do have a couple of questions. So this is a 2-part one, if you're ready to take questions. How many different styles of rosés do you currently produce? And are you simultaneously making small batches of rosés with your free run experimentation, or one large batch for a particular vintage?
Well, as I was saying earlier, when we decide what kind of wine we're going to make, because we normally have about 17 different styles of wines here at Edg-Clif, and soon to have 18. So kind of crazy. Hi, Steph. And so we don't make everything every year. I don't have enough room in this winery to do that. So to do the rosés, we do make 4 different rosés now. One is a port style wine. It's going to be called New Dawn. It's going to be so fun. But then we also have our dry French style rosé, our Sunset, which is a little bit fruitier, a little bit sweeter, but not, it still finishes very crisp and dry. And then of course we have our Twilight, which is our most highly awarded rosé here at Edg-Clif, and we call that a sweet white Chambourcin. So yeah, we do have 4 different kinds of rosés. So we're making, right now, we make about 10 to 11 different wines just with the Chambourcin grape alone. The Vidal Blanc is showing up in 3 different styles of wines here. One of them is a blend with our Vignoles grape that makes our sweet white. It's called Starlight. And then we also have Soleil, which is a 100% Vidal Blanc. And then our varietal, the Vidal Blanc itself. Yeah. And then, of course, you know, we're doing the Vignoles too. So
that's great. That's right. Well, and just in case, because I'm not sure if I asked you this question before, can you explain actually what French American hybrids are? Because that is a unique element to your vineyard.
Yes. So everybody's familiar with the wines that you get in your regular stores or at restaurants that are mostly done out of what we call vinifera grapes. Vinifera are your grapes that are grown mostly in Europe, Italy and France and Germany and so forth. And that is what the basis of most of our wine tasting is on. Those vinifera grapes also are grown now in warm regions like California, Texas, South America. But in the Midwest and in much of the United States, our climate is not suitable to grow those grapes. So along the way, these grapes have been crossed with American native grapes. So Chambourcin, for instance, is a cross of Norton, which is our native grape from the Missouri area. And it actually has a heritage of at least 5 different vinifera grapes in it. So the taste is quite pleasant. It is very reminiscent of a French Pinot Noir or something like that. And people really enjoy it because it's something they recognize. The Vignoles and the Vidal Blanc are also crosses of grapes, and so have attributes from those other their heritage grapes as well.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you. So we have another question. I'm wondering, this questioner is asking, what about the landscape you find yourself in northern Ozarks as compared to the Missouri River side? Is there a unique terroir? Are there other winemakers in the area with whom you share more similarities than you do with other Missouri winemakers?
Well, we think that from our heritage, we have a very unique terroir, right. Because as I was showing you before, that those were all cattle pens. Now, one thing about this area, it's rolling hills. We do have the river that is all spring fed, the Fourche Renault that runs right through the valley at the bottom of these hills. That we've grown the grapes on. So that part is similar to other river valleys. However, the soil is rocky and has some clay content in it, just as in many European vineyards and in South American vineyards. But we also have another attribute in ours in that it was where we had cattle pens and there was cattle raised in these areas for 60 years. And I like to say that there was a real natural composting going on there. Because what the cattle ate the grass and they redeposited right in that area. And so when we did soil tests, we find we had a wonderful amount of organic matter, which was kind of unusual for our area of the Ozarks. And so then it was recommended to us that we would be a great location for these French American hybrids because they would really thrive, and they have.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's
great.
Normally
they say it takes 4 to 5 years to get a crop out of when you first plant a vineyard. And we planted the vines in 2008 in April, and we took our first harvest. We realized by June of 2010 we were going to have a full harvest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. Well, and speaking to your, your winemaking business, like, what's it like being a pair of women working in this industry? Is that a story you'd like to share?
Sure. It's been great. It's been fun to do this together. We have such a passion for this property and for our family heritage here. And so to be able to have something that appeals to both of us, because I love doing things hands-on. I love cooking. I love doing anything with my hands. I'm creative in that regard. And I mean, I used to be a pretty avid gardener as well, but life gets in the way sometimes of certain things. But so for me, making wine has really been a great expression for me of my own creativity. And then, of course, with Steffie being the horticulturist and just a natural born gardener anyway, she's always wanted to grow something out here at Edg-Clif. And so this has been great,
Yeah, we as a team, we've always had to get along. It was part of coming down here every weekend to be with our family. And so we had already understood the give and takes of doing things together and being successful at what you do, whether it's playing a game or now growing grapes and making wine. So it was such a natural progression for us to be in business together. Our husbands aren't so sure about it sometimes, but you know what? They're great guys and they've been really good sports.
Very good sports.
That's great. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. And then and it's been fun having our girls participate in this business with us as well. Just depending on different levels. Katie, which is Steffie's middle daughter, she does a lot of our branding and our advertising work for us. And then, of course, Rachel's been making the beer. She's a true beer lover and very passionate about beers. And so it's been a really kind of a fun fit for her as far as that goes as well. Yeah.
That's great. And there are a couple of hundred vineyards in Missouri, right? And many of them are family-based businesses. And so in terms of demographics, how many of them are women-led?
That I don't know.
I don't think very many of the vineyards themselves are women-led.
450 vineyards in Missouri.
Right.
Yeah. There's only like 130 wineries in Missouri right
125,
now. I think there's like 20 female winemakers, something like that.
Not that many, I don't think.
Yeah.
I can count.
But yeah.
5.
Yeah. But maybe
I think
there's another group.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a great industry for us.
Mm-hmm.
Actually it was a natural. So here we are.
No, well, and it's great. Your passions have collided and dovetailed actually really beautifully.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, our parents loved to entertain down here and always had parties and brought friends. And for us, we did the same, but this gives us an opportunity to host and entertain even people outside of our, our circle, so to speak, and share our, the beauty of this place and the Ozarks. And we're both very adamant about promoting Missouri wines itself, as you'll know, and what we have in the Ozarks to share with people from the outside. And through our Airbnbs, we host people from all over the world, if not all over the country. I mean, all over the country, if not all over the world. And we get to know them and get to do wine tastings and beer tastings with them. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I think we wanted to show you the picture in the background because this is an aerial view we had taken of the farm a few years ago. And actually up here, I know it's hard on the screen, but this is the picture that does show the show barn up here where we are right now, but it gives you an idea. And here's the vineyards we put in. It's straight down below on the cliff. This is our house called the Edg-Clif house. And it is built into the side of the cliff, and the river runs down here below. Down here below. And then now we have the tasting pavilion here, and we do weddings and events out in this wedding field here too. But it can just give you an idea of our place. And
that's great.
Yeah, and as my daughter said when she started to design the labels for us, because the labels do show many different places and buildings on the property. She said, really, it's all about place, Mom. It's not about a style. It's not about a theme. It's not about being French or Italian or California or something like that. It's all about the place that you all love and were raised.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Well, we do have another question about how you are doing things in the vineyard. Do you have an irrigation system, and have you had to irrigate so far this season?
Well, that is a great question because we didn't want to mess around. We're not young kids trying to start a new business. We were experienced people and immediately put an irrigation system in, we put in a new well and all, went to the expense of that in order to put in the vineyards. Because when you're starting a new vine, doesn't have big root system, you really need to get it adequate water so that it'll thrive and grow. And so we do attribute some of the great success we had right away with the soil, but also with the wonderful water we have here in the area. Mm-hmm. Then the question about this year. So frankly, yesterday we had our first rain in about almost 2.5 weeks. So on this last Thursday, Friday, I was noting that there was some stress in the vineyards, and we did do some irrigation in the vineyards for one day. We don't want to over irrigate, but we did want to cool it off a little bit. We'd had the high heat, there were some high winds, and the plants were transferring a lot of moisture, and we're at the point where those grapes are beginning to add volume. And so we just wanted to make sure they could do that.
That's great. And I know we've talked about this, Steffie, a little bit. What's it like to manage any pests that you might have in the vineyard? Because, grape phylloxera is something that we're going to talk about in the exhibition once it's actually open to the public. But how do French American hybrid, vineyard managers like you both, how do you deal with that?
So one of the things why we use a French American hybrid is because they are resistant to phylloxera. We will get leaf phylloxera, but we won't get the root phylloxera. They can't feed on the vine because it's half Norton. And so, and as your story I'm sure tells, that the Norton grape vines were sent as rootstock to Europe in order for them to graft on to those rootstocks and be able to replant their vineyards once they had this big infestation of the phylloxera. Now, other things that we do have to cope with here are funguses, and we've used a lot of benign chemicals. It's chemicals, but it's really not. It's like salts and things like that to try to take care of that. And we use a sulfur spray in the early spring. So we're using what they call an IPM method for that kind of pest. And then we also have Japanese beetles. Now, Japanese beetle is one pest that it was brought in from Asia to the United States. And as anybody knows who has a rose garden, it can really, annihilate the plants. We do have to spray once, maybe twice for the Japanese beetles. But after having worked with it for a while and keeping those populations down, we have eliminated quite a bit of that spraying. And we realized that a little bit of damage from Japanese beetle is not really going to hurt our crop. It's going to thin the foliage a bit. And so we're going to allow that to happen a little bit. We just don't want to get a huge population where they're totally defoliated in a day. So there's a bit of control out there for that.
That's great. Thank you. As we wrap up, is there any final thing you'd like to share with our audience about, anything else you think we need to know about Edg-Clif or your passion for winemaking and viticulture?
I think I would just like to say I encourage everyone to go out and try some Missouri wines. We feel that since we've been in the wine industry this last 11 years now, and in Missouri, that there has been so much great education brought to us through the University of Missouri and the Missouri wine industry supported by the state, that all of the wines have come up in a level that are can rival anything in the United States. And we really encourage people to get out there and try them, and also visit these local wineries and get to know their own state, Missouri, a little bit better.
We actually did get one last question. Where are your wines available?
Okay, well, obviously right here at Edg-Clif. That's the biggest place. But we're also available at all three of the Friar Tuck locations in the St. Louis area. So out on Highway K in Wildwood, Gravy Bluffs down in that area, and also on is that Watson Road? Yeah, it's Watson Road and Crestwood as well. So those are the three biggies. Sometimes we're in some little smaller shops, but I don't even know what's in those right now. Forget my COVID brain today, but I don't think we have a whole lot out there.
Yeah.
And then also locally down here in the Potosi area, we're, Roy's convenience store. We're also at both Frick's stores, if anybody lives out in those areas, Washington and Steelville, and then Potosi Discount Liquor as well in Potosi. Yeah. So we're working on it. That's a work in progress. One of the nice things in Missouri is we do not have to use a distributor because of the size of our winery. We're pretty tiny. And so being a mom and pop business, we're able to load up our SUVs and drive wines around. It's finding the time to be able to do all of that is the struggle.
Yeah.
Things are spread out.
I will put a plug for us going to be at the food truck event in St. Louis County Parks the first Friday in August.
Yeah.
And so if somebody wants a chance to come and taste our wines and you're available that night, we'll see you in Lohmeyer Park because
that's Best of Missouri.
Oh, and then of course we will be at Best of Missouri the first weekend in October, and we have made a lot of friends there. And then they've later come and visited us. So we encourage everybody to mark their calendar for those 2 dates because we will be coming to you then.
Yes, that's right. The Best of the Missouri Market, which takes place at the Missouri Botanical Garden right here in the middle of St. Louis. Wonderful. Ladies, thank you. What I'm going to do right now is just share my screen to show everyone the last bit. This is actually your vineyard right here. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. And thank you so much, Steffie and Cyndy, for sharing the wonderful story. It was so great to learn more about what you do at Edg-Clif. And lastly, I just want to put in a plug for our next talk that's a part of the Grafting the Grape series, which will be on July 19th. That's a Monday afternoon for us in Central Time at 4 p.m. And you're going to be learning a bit more about Choctaw foodways from the Choctaw Nation Tribal Preservation Officer, Dr. Ian Thompson, who's going to be speaking about how grapes and other plants and animals are used in the Choctaw Nation foodways. And they feature several species of these Native American grapes, some of which are now also used today in the wine industry for grafting and for making wine. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you again, Steffie and Cyndy, and have a good day. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.